Last week we talked about gossip. We've been in the Proverbs, and I talked about how so many of the Proverbs relate to gossip. And really, I just planned on that being the only lesson on that. But there's just so much that I just couldn't get it all in. So we're going to dive into that just a little bit more. But I was really amazed at how some of the response that a lot of you had toward that message. I actually heard a lot from men. From men saying, boy, I just needed to hear that. I really struggle with things in that. And the stereotypical thing is that women struggle with gossip. And of course you do. I mean you struggle with gossip. But boy, us men, that becomes a huge thing in our lives as well. And it goes down so much deeper than just the mere act of it. And so we're going to explore that a little bit this morning. There's the story of a lady in a small town, a small church named Mildred. And Mildred was just kind of the lady that was in everybody's business, okay? She just had her nose in everybody's business, and nobody liked it, but they were really kind of scared of her, kind of scared of her. Well, there was this new member named George, and one afternoon, Mildred drove by the town bar, and George's pickup was parked in front of the town bar. And so she started talking to people. I'm just afraid George is an alcoholic, he's just got all this kind of stuff, and I'm worried about what's going to happen to George because she didn't talk to him about it. But anyway, as it always does, it got back to George, and George heard what had been talked about and everything, and he didn't say anything. He didn't defend himself or anything. But that evening, he drove his truck to Mildred's house, and he parked his truck in her driveway, and he left it there all night. Gossip can come back around and bite us in so many different ways, and it really does. When I was growing up, I'm dating myself here terribly, but sometimes I would watch Hee Haw. Okay, anybody of y'all have ever even seen Hee Haw? Okay, well, good. At least some of you, at least some reruns, or but Hee Haw was this silly country variety show, and they all had the Gossip Girls. You remember the Gossip Girls? And they would sing this song every time, oh, you'll never hear of us repeating gossip, so you better be sure and listen close the first time. And then they do all this gossip woven throughout all their song. It was so much a part of our culture that when I was growing up at the church camp that I went to, it wasn't Camp Cottle, it was up in Northwest Arkansas, but church camp, it was just tradition that the oldest girl's cabin would do that song and weave into it all of the camp gossip that had happened over the past week. It was kind of just part of our deal. Most of us grew up thinking of gossip as as pretty funny, pretty lighthearted, maybe a little bit of a guilty pleasure. But a lot of us have lived long enough, and you really don't have to live very long in a lot of cases, to have had gossip affect you in a powerfully negative way. You have experienced being gossiped about, and it was infuriating, humiliating, just destructive in your life, and you've experienced that. You know what the dark side of gossip is, or at least a little bit of what the dark side of gossip is. And certainly as we read the Bible, we discover quickly that gossip isn't a funny thing. It isn't a lighthearted thing, that it is truly destructive in our lives and the lives of people around us. And, you may have a little bit of trouble, buying into the fact that, gossip is that destructive. I mean, it's just words. It's just words. We've actually heard that in our culture quite a bit lately. It's just words. But we find out quickly that words really matter. Words matter. Here's one proverb of many that kind of express that. The tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. Think about that. The tongue can bring death. The tongue can bring life. The tongue can destroy. The tongue can breathe life into people. It can really matter. And not only does it matter to those people around you, but it has consequences toward you. It always comes back on you. The way that you use your words, you will ultimately reap consequences of the kinds of things that you say. Here's another example. Wise words are more valuable than much gold and many rubies. if you've got wise words to share with somebody, the godly words of wisdom, that is such a valuable thing that you have to give. And for you to seek out people who are wise, who have wisdom to give to you, because wisdom, as we find out in Proverbs, man, you give your life to pursue wisdom. It matters more than anything. Wise words are more valuable than much gold and rubies. On the other hand, Proverbs 11:12, whoever derides their neighbor has no sense, but the one who has understanding holds their tongue. If you talk bad about the people around you, the Proverbs writers say that is really dumb. You have no sense if you're talking bad about the people around you. That is going to hurt you. Yes, it's going to do a lot of damage to people around you, but it is going to end up hurting you. Last week, we were challenged to commit ourselves to do away with gossip in our lives. And not just reduce it. A lot of times when we think about something like gossip, we say, I need to do less of that. I don't need to gossip so much. But no, we need to not be content with any gossip in our lives. Are we going to mess up sometimes? Yes, absolutely. But just as we don't want just a little bit of murder in our lives, we don't want just a little bit of adultery in our lives, we don't want any gossip. We don't want to justify it. We don't want to make excuses for it. We don't want to twist it so it sounds like it's something actually good. We want to do away with gossip because it is that destructive. And so we're encouraged to ask ourselves a few questions. So as just a quick review, ask these questions as you're in conversation with someone, especially if it's kind of tilting toward the gossipy side. Is it helpful or hurtful? Is what I'm saying, is it helpful or is it hurtful? Am I making public what should be private? Now, if just these two questions, these top two questions, if you'll ask them whenever you're in a conversation with someone and it kind of drifts toward talking about somebody else, if you'll ask these two questions, if you'll just get in the habit, it will help you head off gossip. Just kind of destroy it because, if it's hurtful, I'm not going to go there. If it's making public something that really is somebody's private information, I'm not going to go there. Another couple of questions. Am I listening to it? As we talked about, there is no gossip where there is no listener. If you are listening to gossip, you are participating in gossip, you are promoting gossip by listening. So am I listening to it? And then what is going on in my heart? For us to look deeper, why am I tempted to gossip about this? Why do I want to talk about this? What is going on in my heart that is leading me to this? And that's really what we want to get to in a little bit deeper way this morning. There are proverbs that are just super practical and really helpful, like this one. I mean, you just can't get past the point. You can't miss the point here. Proverbs 10:19, too much talk leads to sin. Be sensible and keep your mouth shut. Okay? We get that. We understand that. That's simple. Keep your mouth shut. That's helpful, but it's really, it's not everything that we need in order to get to the root of why is it that I even want to gossip to begin with. Gossip is what we might call a secondary sin. And what I mean by that is gossip is a sin that grows up out of other sin, in our life. Gossip is born out of pride. We've talked about pride quite a bit lately. Gossip may be born out of envy. Gossip born out of anger, even hate. Gossip may be born out of greed. See, there's more core sins in our life that give birth to this sort of more surface, secondary sin of gossip. Gossip comes from a darkened, polluted heart, And whenever I'm tempted to gossip, whenever I'm tempted to say something bad about somebody else, it's like, what is this darkness in my heart that causes me to want to talk about this? This is a proverb that I just feel like kind of governs all the other proverbs in so many ways. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. It's about our heart, We could talk about a lot of practical things of do this and not do this, but ultimately what we want to get at is our heart, to protect and purify our heart. So this morning, let's follow the words. We're going to try to go in reverse, okay? And let's follow the words that come out of our mouth. And let's follow them to the heart that those words come out of. And we're going to just focus on one little thing. This is not comprehensive of all gossip at all, but here is one thing that creeps up in our life that is one of the causes of some of the most destructive gossip that happens in our life. First of all, let's just acknowledge the fact that gossip is fun. All right? Gossip is pleasurable. There is pleasure in gossip. There is fun in gossip. It is something that we enjoy doing, okay? We don't gossip because we want to sin, okay? We gossip because there is a certain amount of enjoyment in that gossip. And the writer of Proverbs says as much. Proverbs 18:8, the words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the inmost part. It says, gossip is like eating candy, okay? It's like eating candy. It's sweet, but it goes down into us and it affects every part of our life. There's a feeling of power of being in the know, of having the knowledge, of being able to tell somebody else something that we know, having insider information. By talking about other people's faults and other people's problems, we just sort of puff up. We lift ourselves up at somebody else's expense. It somehow makes me feel better to talk about the problems of others. Because, hey, I admit, I may have some issues, I may have some problems, but at least I don't do that. I may have some problems, but at least I haven't, been involved in that kind of thing. I'm not like that. I mean, that is, that's just beyond the, as long as I can look at what somebody else is doing and I can I can put myself above that. It's all about insecurity. Because that's what it is. When I start gossiping to somebody, if there is a wise person in the vicinity that's hearing it, that instantly tells them something. And what it tells them is that I am insecure. If a wise person hears me gossiping, you can think about this when you're gossiping sometime. Hopefully but if you catch yourself gossiping, if there's a wise person hearing me, they know something about me now. And what they know about me is that I am insecure. I don't feel okay with who I am. I need to somehow boost myself up to be okay in my own eyes and the people around me. Of course, you might say, I'm not really so much insecure. I just have a problem with pride. And that is absolutely right, because pride and insecurity essentially just go together. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, when I make myself the center of my universe, when I live as though, even though I know mentally that's not true, but when I live as though the world revolves around me, what I care about is all about what affects me, what people think about me, what's going on with me, and when it's about me, I have placed myself in the center of my own universe, and that is an insecure place to be, because I wasn't created to be the center of the universe. I wasn't created for life to be about me, and when I make it about me, I am instantly in an insecure position. And so in order to make myself feel secure, I have got to artificially build a foundation that, I belong here. Okay, I belong here in the center of my universe. I have to artificially build myself up so that I feel okay in my position here at the center of my own little universe. And that's pride, that's insecurity. It's really all the same thing, because when I recognize, and not only just realize it mentally, but when I begin to live as though reality is that God is the center of the universe, that life is about Him, that my life is about Him, that I revolve around Him, that I have a role in His world, and everything that I do, everything that I have is from Him, everything that I do is about Him, this is about Him, and I revolve around Him. When I begin to live that way, I realize where I belong, my place. And I don't have to artificially puff myself up anymore, because God made me, God loves me. God saved me. God has a plan and a purpose for my life, and I'm secure. That's where I am. That's who I am. I don't have to artificially build myself up because the world doesn't revolve around me. It's not about me to begin with. I'm just so thankful that God created and loved me and has made me a part of His purpose here. Man, to be a child of God, to be a servant of God, to be in God's family and doing God's stuff, that's such an honor in itself. And I don't have to artificially build myself up by putting other people down. When we realize that we have tried to make ourselves the center of our own universe, we get to the core of what gossip comes from. We get to the core of where pride comes from, really to the core of what all sin comes from. It's what caused Adam and Eve, the story of Adam and Eve, it's what caused them to eat the fruit. And it's the same thing that causes us to gossip. So, for just a moment, I want to get a little closer to the surface, okay? That was kind of down at the very core, this pride. I want to get a little closer to the surface of what leads us to gossip in many cases, okay? This is really just one aspect. Let's look at these two proverbs right here. Hatred stirs up quarrels, but love makes up for all offenses. Fire goes out without wood, and quarrels disappear when gossip stops. Okay, I'm putting these two together. There's a real relation here. Quarreling and gossip really go together. He says, if you've got a quarrel going on, if you take away the gossip, the quarrel burns itself out. It just doesn't have fuel. Gossip is fuel for quarrels. And when you remove gossip from the quarrel, it tends to just die down. How do quarrels start? How do fights start? How do quarrels begin? Well, as implied in the first proverb there, we are offended. Somebody offends somebody else. Somebody is inconsiderate of me. Somebody mistreats me. Somebody snubs me. Somebody intentionally or unintentionally, it can be both. Somebody insults me. Somebody purposefully humiliates me. Somebody votes for somebody I'm opposed to. Somebody makes fun of something that I really like. Maybe somebody they just have an air about them. They just act superior. It just crawls all over me. I just don't like the way they act, the way they are. They just seem like somebody does something or some things that offends me. And the quarrel is birthed. What do you do when somebody makes you feel small? What do you do when somebody makes you, something they do, something they say, something that makes you feel small? I've talked about before that I used to go to Mexico every year for a week. And there was this guy who coordinated everything down there. He had a special gift, a spiritual gift for making me feel small. Okay? Drove me crazy. One day, one particular trip, before we left, he'd sent out an email. And the email said, okay, in Mexico right now, as you cross the border, we're having a real problem with buses. So we don't want to have anybody to bring anything over a 15-passenger vehicle across the border so that you don't get held up and it cause kind of problems. So 15-passenger vehicle, that's max. So I was like, okay, great. Well, the church I was at, this was years ago, church I was at, they had a 15-passenger van, but they also had a 15-passenger fiberglass deal, one of those bus vans / hybrid bus things, but it was only a 15-passenger vehicle. So I was like, oh, good, we can bring it because it just is 15-passenger, you don't need a CDL or anything like that. Well, we show up at the hotel there in Mexico, and I'm standing there with another church leader from another church, and he looks out and he says, who brought that bus? I was like, oh, that's our van. It only seats 15 passengers. And he goes, I told you not to bring that. And I'm like, no, it only, your email said 15 passenger. It's only a 15 passenger vehicle. And he said, and he just laid into me. He just lit into me right there. And I tried to defend myself, but okay, I didn't have smartphones, I couldn't bring up the email or anything, and it was just humiliating me right in front of that person, the people around, and I was so Man, I wrestled with that the entire week we were there as I was supposed to be serving God. I'm just like, this is going to, and it made me feel small. How do you react when somebody, in some way, it can be really subtle, it can be really blatant, when somebody makes you feel small? I wish it was just a thing that I wrestled with years ago. That I don't really have that problem now. But the truth is I care too much about what you think about me. I really do. I care too much about what you think about it. If all of you, honestly, if even a few of you started, treating me with disrespect, start, making fun of me, start, looking down on me, oh, Brian, this, and start talking about me in a negative way, and, just kind of, it would hurt my feelings. It would hurt my feelings. It would get to me. I would wrestle with it. I would struggle with it because, my sense of self-worth is far too tied to what other people think about me. Because, you see, no one can make you small unless your sense of worth is tied to their approval. No one can make me small unless my sense of self-worth is tied to their approval. So what do we do when we are offended? How do we respond when somebody does something that makes us feel small in some way, that threatens our sense of self-worth? I'll tell you what our natural reaction is. You know what our natural reaction is. Natural reaction is, if they're going to treat me that way, well, I'm just going to give it back. If they're going to act like they're too good for me, I'm just going to be too good for them. If they're going to act like that, I'm going to go talk to my friends over here and see, have you noticed how they're acting? What do you think? Have they ever treated you that way? I'm going to form myself just a little army of people, because, it feels better when I get other people to agree with me that they're bad. When I can kind of get some other people to agree with me that, we'll form a little army. And so I feel better about myself. And at the best, we just avoid them, right? Okay, I'm not going to gossip about them. I'm not going to say anything to anybody. I'm just going to stay away from them, right? That usually is our best option. But the writer of Proverbs is brilliant, okay? The writer of Proverbs is just brilliant. He actually gives us a solution to the problem. Because really the ways that we come up with naturally, they don't solve anything. They don't really help anything. He doesn't give us just avoidance. Doesn't just, hey, form lines so that you're cutting this way and they're cutting that way and you're cutting each other apart. This way that the Proverbs writer gives us is much, much more difficult and far, far easier. Now you say that doesn't make sense, and I realize that. But it is much, much more difficult to do. When you do it, it makes everything far, far easier. In fact, if you do what the Proverbs writer says here, almost all of your quarrels will disappear. Now, I say almost. We get some exceptions, but if you do this, your quarrel will simply go away. Are you tired of that bickering back and forth, the whispering going on here, whispering going on there? Are you tired of that knot in your stomach, that anxiety, that stewing over, I can't believe about what they did and what they did to you and how what somebody said? Are you tired of that just inner angst that going on in your mind of what you would like to say to that person? I'd like to give them a piece of my mind. This is what I would say, and you say it to yourself over and over and over, hoping somehow it's just muted over to them without you actually having to say it. Are you tired of that? So that if you do what the proverb writer says, actually makes it disappear. But it is very, very difficult. Hatred stirs up quarrels. But love makes up for all offenses. You want to put a stop to it. You want to stop it before it ever starts. You want to end it after it has started. You want to keep it from ever starting to begin with. The writer of Proverbs says, it's not about avoiding them. Certainly not about talking about them. You choose to love them. You forgive them, whether they are asking for forgiveness or not. You seek what is best for them. You desire what will help them. You desire their blessing. You give sacrificially to them. You give in ways to them that they would never give to you. They would never do that for you. You choose to try to see them as God sees them and love them anyway. Not just tolerate them, certainly not gossip about them, but to love them. Now, I want to emphasize that this doesn't mean that you necessarily are going to trust them, okay? You don't have to trust somebody in order to love them. It doesn't mean that they're going to be your hangout buddy now. They may not be somebody you need to have as a hangout buddy, okay? But you can love them. You can do that which makes up for all offenses. Love makes up for all offenses. Too many of our relationships are hanging by this fragile thread. Maybe all of our relationships hanging by this fragile thread. Oh, he said this about me. Oh, I can't believe he said that. I'm not going to be his friend anymore. She did, look, somebody did this to me. They hurt me. They snubbed me. I thought they were my friend. They snubbed me. Well, forget them. You know, I heard they were talking about me. I'm done. I'm done. It's it. They expressed opinions. It goes to this. They expressed opinions that I totally disagree with. I guess we're not on the same page after all. I guess I don't need to be their friend. They were selfish and inconsiderate of me, so it's over. Really? Really? They did that to you. They said that about you. They did that, and the relationship is over? Is it that fragile? Are your relationships hanging by a thread? What if our relationship with God was like that? What if every time you were inconsiderate to God, that you snubbed Him, that you ignored Him, that you treated Him with disrespect, that you actually flat out did what you knew was hurtful to Him? What if, when you did that, He said, fine, done with you. That's it. You know, you go do your thing. I'm not taking that. I don't have to hear that. I don't have to live with that. I don't have to see that. I'm done with you. How long would we stay in God's grace if God did that? And you know the answer to that. No time at all. It'd be done. It'd be over. We would have absolutely no hope at all if God treated us. How is it that we can hold other people to a standard that we could never live up to? Now you say, but they did something to me that I would never do to them. They said something about me. I would never say anything like that about them. Okay? But it's not about what they did to you. After all, okay, we sometimes say this, if I would have been them, I would have never done that. I would have never done that to me. But the truth is that if I was actually them, and I had grown up in their family, and I had their personality, and I had their experiences through life, and I had learned to see the world the way they see them, it may be that I would have done exactly what they did. Of course, I'll never know. What I do know is that I offend God on a regular basis. I know what He desires of me, and I do the opposite on a regular basis. I am inconsiderate. I snub Him. I live in a way that acts like I don't even know Him sometimes. And if God were to hold me to the standard that I hold other people to, I would have absolutely no hope at all. you know, despite the fact of what I have done to God, despite the fact of what you have done to God, all the ways that you have been inconsiderate to Him, all the ways that you have hurt Him, He still loves you. He hasn't walked away from you. He's not about to walk away from you. Your relationship with Him does not hang by a thread. Aren't you glad? Aren't you glad that your relationship with Him doesn't hang by this thread, that as soon as you do something hurtful to Him, He's done with you? How about, rather than hold others to our imaginary standard, we just choose to look at people the way that God looks at them and love. Now, I know that that's way, way, way easier to say than do. Okay? I'm very aware that that's one thing to say that. You just love them. Just love them. And that is so much easier to say than to do. But let's not lower the standard. Let's not say, oh man, that's just hard. That's just hard to do. I can't do that. Or, and justify ourselves, but really, how can I be expected to actually love someone who has done this? And let's not lower the standard. Yeah, will we fall short? Yeah, absolutely, we'll fall short. But let us seek to love people, to look at people the way God looks at them, to love people the way God loves them. And watch what happens to our quarrels. Watch what happens to gossip. It disappears. It goes away. The fuel is just drained out of it. Because love drives away hate. Love drives away envy. Love makes up for all offenses. Light shines in darkness, and darkness cannot overcome it. Dear God, I just want to acknowledge before you that we, God, I speak for many of us, we hold things against other people in our lives. We have been offended. We have been hurt. We have been felt like just pulled apart and destroyed. God, some things we hold against people are small things. Some things that we hold against people are large things. And God, I ask that you help us to be released, to be freed from all that we have held in our hearts because of those who have offended us. Dear God, help us to love. Help us to sincerely love. And God, as we fall short and as we fall on our face, help us not to lose sight of that goal. That God, I want to love like you love. I want to choose to love people like you do. I want to choose to love others the way that you have loved me. God, help us make that our standard. Free us from the quarreling in our lives, the quarreling inside of our heart, the quarreling that we do in our minds because we have been offended. And teach us how to love, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.